We live to fight another week, folks. The Buffalo Bills take down the Jacksonville Jaguars on the road and live to see another playoff game as they head to the divisional round and take a trip back to the Mile High Stadium. That's right. They're playing the number one seed Denver Broncos in a very highly anticipated showdown this Saturday afternoon. We're excited for it. I hope you're excited for it. I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. And without further ado, let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
Citizens of Earth, lend me your eyes, lend me your ears. Once again, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. Tonight's tagline is Naruto, only because I thought of that merely 20 minutes before the episode began and needed a tagline because for whatever reason, I couldn't change it last week. I'm very excited for this one. I'm very excited for the game, tonight's episode. The vibes are high. It's also even more of a special episode. So one of my favorite guests is returning. That is Mr. Adam Pencil, noted Sean McDermott stan himself. Adam, welcome back to the show. You were here a couple weeks ago. I am happy to have you back. How you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. It's good to be back. We're here another week. The thing that I sent this tweet out before the Jacksonville game last week, and I said, make sure that it was like 2 days before the game, and I said, make sure everybody's soaking this up because I feel like one of the most fun things about having another game is you have another week of anticipation, of diving into the matchup, of figuring out, or trying to figure out what may or may not happen in this game. And I think, the week leading up to the game is almost every bit as good as being able to watch the game itself. So I hope everybody's had a good week. We've got, about 48 hours, a little less than that, until we get to finally see a game. And, hopefully we'll have another one after that.
Yeah, hopefully we do. And I just think it's so funny that we've been talking about all these playoff games, and yet somehow the narrative has not died that this is the Bills season where they have to do it. And I've been losing my mind. And it's nice to have a sensible person on the episode, that to talk this with, because I feel like if you go on Twitter, it's just like a nightmare of nonstop ridiculous takes about how it's either this year or never. And I don't want to deal with that. I want to talk about football in a very objective, fun way, and not with dudes who have call sheet badges who treat every single game like it's basically a boxing match between two people. That's a really stupid way to watch sports. You shouldn't do that. You should watch team sports and evaluate it based on the team. But that's just me. I don't know. Maybe I'm outlandish for proposing that. But this is a game that was earned because they had an absolute dogfight down in Jacksonville. It was that kind of game you expected, considering the Jags' advanced metrics were very good. The defense was extremely stout. Run defense, one of the best units in the league. In fact, it was the best unit in the league when all was said and done. Pass defense was exceptional, and Anthony Campanelli did a great job in this game, even with the result that Josh Allen put before us. It was a tough team. A tough team that game of everything they had. But when it came down to it, the difference in the game really did result in one guy was able to get more buckets than the other guy. And that's the way the cookie crumbled. And it makes you appreciate the stellar performance Josh Allen had. It makes you appreciate really Sean McDermott's ability in this game and what he did. Adam, give me your thoughts on the Bills versus Jaguars playoff matchup, the win they got on the road, and how you're feeling after it.
Yeah, well, I feel great. Going into the game, I felt like it was basically a coin flip. If you looked at the Vegas sports books, it was essentially that. There was lines were kind of all over the place. Some people had the Bills favored just before kickoff. Some people had the Jags favored. In the build up to the week and looking at all the stats that I was looking at, it appeared that it was going to be very close. Even the week before the game, I published my new downsetdominance.com that looks at leverage adjusted weighted series conversion, and even looking at that overall net series conversion of, Jacksonville versus Buffalo, those teams were incredibly close, with Buffalo having a slight edge. So, I'm not surprised that they got the win. I think if there is anything surprising about it, it's that the Bills demonstrated an ability to get the win without the run game being very effective. And man, is that encouraging. Especially with how many more quality defenses that they're going to have to play coming up here. Some are better against the run than others. We might be facing a team this week that they potentially have an opportunity to, run the ball a little bit better than they did last week, but, that'll be a, wait and see type thing. But, you know, going into the playoffs, I felt that if this team was going to have success, we were going to see two things. One of those is Josh Allen go on a 4-game heater. If they're going to win the Super Bowl, he's going to have to go on a 4-game heater, and he's capable of it. But 4-game heater is a must. And then the other thing was we're going to need to see a Sean McDermott defense pull all the right strings more often than not. And I felt like we got both in the wild card round. And so here we are today talking about a matchup with the Broncos, and we get to do this again.
Absolutely, man. And on the offensive side of the ball, it is a great point to bring up that they really couldn't run. They were neutralized pretty much in every which way, except for a few successful runs when they did that toss play to James Cook on both sides. And you came to wonder, well, if they're really trying to fit this type of play in, it seems like they're matched well between the tackles, up the center of the line. And they were. The Jaguars defensive line deserves a ton of credit. They generated a lot of push, a very stout unit, hard to move around. They backed up the metrics that they presented before the matchup began. And it just didn't really matter because Josh Allen was cerebral and the play action game was still a factor. And I think that these two things combined with, as pointed out by our film room guys and people that have really evaluated this offense extensively, kind of some of the little tweaks they made to the passing attack to just give these receivers a little more time. I know Eric just dropped a film room feature where he was talking with Connor McGovern, Bill Center, which you should check out. And one of the things that they were talking about was really the types of drops Josh Allen had, the play action that they ran, and Josh Allen almost running like they didn't use this term verbatim. It almost felt like a quarter boot, like he's shaping to go to his right, but then he stops. And that little bit of like that little extra bit is enough to get people open. Like it was. And I think that vital part of the passing game in this game, and it helped Josh Allen see the field a little more, stave off pressure a little more, get a little bit of extra time to let long developing plays flourish. And they had a lot of success. In fact, so much success that I would even argue you might have just witnessed Josh Allen's, in my opinion, third best playoff game ever. He was unbelievable in this game and never felt threatened, never felt rattled. Moments where the defense kind of got the better of them and he was forced to either take a check down or really be a little more patient in his approach. Nothing was a given in this game. And I think the tweak to the passing were encouraging to see it when they can't run the football because they're facing a stout run defense. They're going up against another one this week. But if they are able to run the ball, which they did on this very same front last year, I mean, we saw an offense that didn't really have it in their back pocket and could still be productive through the air. Now imagine if they do, and you're going to get the best version of the Buffalo Bills offense that we've seen times over this season. And it would be a very welcome sight considering that that's your ace in the hole. And that's the way that you can control games and really dominate in the playoffs and help your defense out. And on the other side of the ball, Adam, go on, please.
Oh, no. Yeah, I was going to say it is interesting. Also, there were, I forget who it was. Somebody, a tweet showed up in my feed that showed that specifically duo runs that the Bills do so well. They're, top 5 in the league at. Denver is bottom 5, so that's definitely, something to put a big fat circle over. The real question mark is, winning in the run game is about winning in the trenches, right? And it requires another next level of dominance. And they have the size advantage, but, obviously we have a short week traveling to Denver, going to the West Coast, playing at altitude. There's a lot of, sort of to be seens, going into this game, sort of question marks related to relative strengths and then also just the environment, but I feel like if the Bills end up going into that game and being able to run the ball, it's going to be really difficult for Denver to stay in this game.
And that was a thing that was kind of offered during the week when it came to the matchup itself, when we were talking about could the Bills be able to run the ball? And, many people had pointed to the Denver line and the build of Denver's line and how that could be a bit of a mismatch and how it proved to be a mismatch last year. Because when they faced off in the wild card round, Denver came into the game with very similar metrics. They were a top rated defense. They had the most sacks in the NFL. I didn't really feel terribly threatened by them last year just because I thought they were a bit of a team on the rise that didn't really cement themselves yet. But I still took note of a very good defense, generated turnovers, but there were just moments where it felt like during the year they gave up some uncharacteristic amount of points in the season. And I feel like that's happened again this year, where it almost feels like, even though they've added guys like Hufanga and Barron that they drafted in the first round, and it's still an immensely talented defense that I respect and think is going to give them a lot of trouble in this game, I do have to wonder if the lack of really change up front, facing the same offensive line you went up against last year, spamming the same run concept that they did last year, and you still proving you're having trouble defending it, if that is going to matter in this game, and if you could get an offensive repeat of what you got last year. Because again, they do, Adam. It's going to be tough. It's going to be very difficult for them. And I don't want to be a homer here, but I mean, like, we saw it, tangible evidence of what that looks like on a field in the playoffs, and it was not in Denver's favor, and eventually the well cracked. And I think for the Bills, we'll get into this matchup a little more. That's something they're going to lean on. But I think just when you talked about the defensive side of the ball, Adam, the big thing for me was, I had said on the show last week, got criticized, but it was a big game for Sean McDermott for me as far as my faith in him, because I had said on a show a few weeks back in the Houston game, I was questioning leadership. I was questioning if this was going to be the right regime, if this was going to be the one to get them over the hump. I felt like those uncharacteristically bad losses you see during the year made my faith shake a bit, and made me kind of waver, and made me think, well, is Joe Brady the guy? Is Sean McDermott the guy? Is Brandon Beane going to get it done? And while I still have my questions, one of the biggest things was, for Sean McDermott, you need to get the road playoff win, and you need to prove to me that, like, you are in control, because I can't see another 13 seconds. I can't see that those woes continue. And they go on the road, and while it is far from perfect, and I can acknowledge that, the fact that they were, again, just very willing to go through the kitchen sink, through the cupboard, to throw whatever they could at Trevor Lawrence to make him feel off balance. The fact that they had the ball going against them in the final minute, and it took no time at all for Trevor Lawrence to throw. Like, they didn't even make it interesting, right? Like, the very first play of that final drive is a coverage that nobody knows what it is, which I think is so funny that that's still, like, debated. Like, some people are saying it's cover 2, cover 3. I don't know. Cover 1 even. It's just, I don't know what the hell it is. All I know is Cole Bishop made a play, and it was a really good play, and they got a clutch game-sealing interception with no strife from the fan base. We scored the go-ahead touchdown. The game ended. And I think that part of it renewed my faith a little bit, and is also just a really big thing for Sean McDermott as a coach, Adam. And, like, I want to turn it back to you, because he needed this win. You're going to have to go on the road at some point. We've seen it. It's not always going to be a year where you can get the 1 seed. So the fact that he gets this win, I think, is massive for him. And I think it gives him a lot of confidence and momentum going into Denver. How do you feel about that? I mean, what are your thoughts on just McDermott getting the first road win, and how much stock you really put into it?
I don't put a lot of stock into the fact that it's his first road win. I think he's a good coach. I think he's been a good coach. I think, the road win thing is kind of like when people say, wins aren't a quarterback stat, right? They are technically a head coach stat, but when I look at home and road splits, I really don't like to pay a lot of attention to it. I don't think that there's certain things that some coaches do inherently better than others at playing on at home versus the road. I just think that, it's mostly variance, happenstance, circumstance, whatever, that leads to maybe some coaches being slightly better than others, on those splits. The main reason the Bills didn't have any wins on the road for such a long time is they weren't playing on the road. They had a good teams for so long that they didn't do a lot of playing on the road. And when they did play on the road, of course, it was against Kansas City, who a lot of teams lost to them, at Arrowhead. It wasn't just the Buffalo Bills. So, overall, though, the most encouraging thing is seeing Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich push all the right buttons. When I log on to, Twitter, X, whatever, the next day after a game, and I see, all of the best people in film, Eric Turner and Anthony Prohaska, of course, on our own staff, but, their names are escaping me right now, but there's a whole, bunch of them that I follow that were just, giving McDermott a ton of flowers for the game plan that was put into place. Specific things that they used to fool Trevor Lawrence, and really take him off his game, that were specific to the way that Jacksonville plays football. That's a great thing to see the day after a game, right? And so that's what you want to see moving forward. We need to see more of it. And I for a long time, I felt that McDermott has been capable of it. And even this season, when things were wavering a little bit and things didn't look good, there were a lot of changes in the offseason in terms of staff who they brought on, players. Obviously, they went
Yeah.
through a lot of injuries. And so sometimes it takes teams a little bit longer than others to figure out what all the right buttons are to press, what the right players are to have on the field in certain situations. And it feels a little bit like the Bills figured it out at exactly the right time.
Mm.
And the other thing that I will say is, how nice was it to see that on that last coverage that you're talking about with the Cole Bishop interception, that as great of a game as Trey White had all day in zone coverage, that last play was in man. He's man to man with his man coming across, getting the pass breakup.
Yeah.
Trey White during his recovery phase was not going stride for stride with many receivers. And there he was right in the hip pocket to make the pass breakup, deflect the ball, sets up the interception, game over. How great is that to see?
Oh, it's amazing. Trey White's resurgence, that is something that I am so happy to see for a few reasons. One, you getting all pro caliber play, and I will use that term, all pro caliber play from Trey White, which is just a bonus when you consider that you brought him back on a very cheap contract because it was more of a prove it deal. Turning 30, coming off the Achilles injury, and you're thinking like, I think we've seen Trey White's best football. I think it's behind him, but hey, maybe he could be a good mentor for Max Hairston. Maybe he could be a nice rotational zone corner, someone that's not bad, but rather just not an every down player. But he's been an every down player. He's been a tremendous coverage guy. He's been heady in zone, but he's also just been really savvy and man with really good technique and just been in the hip pocket of some very talented players. I know there was the one rep from BTJ in the red zone where BTJ got the better of him because I think he was offering outside leverage and BTJ cut inside and he just couldn't recover quickly enough. But for most of the game, covered his assignment. Was reading Trevor Lawrence's eyes and looked very good. And I think that it's incredible to see that, but also for the person. I mean, I've gone on this show and I've told you Trey White's one of my favorite Bills ever. He will always be one of my favorite Bills ever because we'll always signify this era of football with Josh Allen, Sean McDermott being like the major factors, the signal of change. But the signal of change started with Trey White. Like Trey White gets to Buffalo his rookie year. They make the playoffs. Like he is synonymous with success coming back to Western New York. And I think that's like for legacy purposes, so important. But he's also just been a consummate pro and like the most wonderful human being by all accounts since he came to Buffalo, even when he left. And now that he's back, just one of my favorite players of all time. Just truly seems like an exceptional person, an exceptional human being. And I'm just so happy he's back, but also balling out. And that it's not like this novelty to have Trey White on your roster. And it's like, it's Trey White, but he doesn't really do anything. It's Trey White. He's awesome. And he's playing like a maniac right now in the playoffs when he needs to be counted on because Max Hairston can't go. And, like playing in man, playing in zone, all of these different things that he can do and provide for you is just a massive boost. And I'm so happy to see it. And he's been an ample part of what they've been able to do defensively. It's great for the whole team. And you make great points about Sean McDermott. And for me, it for me just mattered to get that one win, I think is why I was so hell-bent on it. Because I just felt like it was a weird thing to be able to have all these home opportunities. And that's great. And I do agree with you. It means you're a good team. But I don't think every year is going to be the situation you dream of where you're always going to be home. You're always going to have that luxury. You have to prove that in a hostile environment, you could take a team down. And to see them do that, yes, there were multiple factors. And I wouldn't have pinned it all solely on Sean McDermott if they had lost that game. But I would have been disappointed because it's another loss. And we've had 5 games at this point. But he got it. Hostile environment, loud crowd, kept the defense at bay. They made some really nice adjustments. They looked really good. And I'm happy to see it. And I give him all the props. And I'll give him even more props if they win in Denver on the road. But Adam, turning it back to you, any final thoughts, anything you want to talk about from Bills Jags before we move on to our matchup?
No, I think the only other thing I'll say is, great job to Tyrell Shavers playing on that injury and, really feel bad for Gabe Davis. It was so good to see him back. I feel like he was, really starting to flash. Obviously he made that beautiful catch against the Jets, in the last week before the playoffs. And, a guy who, worked so hard to come back and only to have that happen in the first week of the playoffs, is a real bummer. But, those two guys, I know they'll be all right, with how hard they work and, just unfortunate with the kind of run that we're looking to have.
Yeah, wishing a speedy recovery for both. It sucks. It's just point blank, it sucks. I feel horrible for Gabe. all the effort he put into rehab that knee and suffering this injury. It sucks. There's no way around it. I just wish him a speedy recovery, and I hope that he can get back on a football field, because I do think there's still plenty for him to offer. He's still a young guy. Like, this isn't a 35-year-old at the tail end of their career. Gabe has a lot of football ahead of him, and I think he's still going to play it. And I think he's going to come back, whether it's for the Bills, whether it's for a different team, and make noise in his role. So I'm rooting for him. I never want to see that. And then Terrell Shavers, it's the same thing, but I got to just give so much credit and praise to that guy for the entire season. I mean, I remember doing episodes last year on the show, Adam, where it was like, I wanted Shavers to get that final roster spot. And then he didn't. He got a practice squad spot, but then they gave him a couple times. He takes the screen to the house against the Jets. Like, cool moments for him. Then he finally gets his shot. And even though he didn't have like the world beating numbers, like 1,000 yards, which I never expected from him, he was a blocker. He was so good in his role. He solidified the run game. I actually think losing him sucks for this rushing attack, because it's an integral part of your blocking assignments. It's gone now, but he just handled things the right way. He went about it so well with so much poise. And then to play on a torn ACL for 22 snaps, including like goal line stands where you're getting down and dirty, pushing. I'm pretty sure he had a rep where he pushed Greg Newsome out of the way on that bum knee. Like, dude, that's insane amount of toughness that I will never have. I hate stubbing my toe or hitting my elbow on a door. I can't even imagine playing football on a torn ACL. So credit to him, man. Tough SOB. I hope he's back next year. I was really excited for him, coming back and being kind of the back end of the wide receiver room while they retooled it. I'm wishing him a speedy recovery. I hope he can be back sooner than later. But regardless, that man has earned his stripes. That man, to me, just for doing that, is already a legend. And you could argue like you're using legend too loosely. Listen, 22 snaps on a torn ACL is badass. That is tough guy shit, and he deserves so much credit. So shout out to them. Wishing him a speedy recovery for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
So now I want to move on to the crux of this episode, the Broncos versus the Bills. An exciting one that we are going to be seeing at Empower Field, Mile High Stadium. I don't even remember what it is. I think I had that right, but maybe I'm wrong. And I want to start with Denver's offense versus the Buffalo Bills defense that we just spent a little bit of time praising. And it's an offense that I don't want to call it inconsistent. That's not the right word. They've had some very good performances this year, but what I feel like you're seeing is year 2 of Bo Nix still ironing out the kinks of his game with multiple fourth quarters where he just turned into Tom Brady. And I know that sounds exaggerative, but he had some incredible comebacks and played some really poised, sound football. And he's had very high moments this year. He's had some very good throws. Some of his deep ball throws were very, very accurate, really good lead. Him and Troy Franklin don't have the best metrics together, but there were moments and flashes where the connection seemed like it was back from Oregon. You have Cortland Sutton in this offense, Engram, and Pat Bryant, who was having a really solid rookie year. I actually have to check on his status. I don't believe he's going to be playing in this game because I know the concussion was really bad, but I have to double check on that. It's an offense that you still have to respect the passing game. And when you look at their EPA, they're sitting 10th in EPA per play with 9th in EPA per pass, but 18th in EPA per rush. And losing J.K. Dobbins, I do think has a lot to do with the metrics kind of declining over the second half of the year. I thought Dobbins was having a very good year for them. Harvey feeding off of that duo, but then RJ Harvey now has to take on the full-time running back mantle and still developing very much as a runner, but more of a pass-catching threat, which I do think matters in this game. It's not an offense that I'm going to take lightly, but the advanced analytics would say that they're a tad bit lower than Jacksonville's was. And I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about them, Adam, as far as what you're expecting in this matchup. How do you expect Sean McDermott to attack Bo Nix? Really anything you feel like presents itself for this matchup.
Yeah, what's really interesting about this game is when I started looking up some of the advanced analytics, actually, when I was looking up Jacksonville last week is where I noticed this. They are so close together in so many different metrics, whether I was looking at, where they ranked in DVOA against tight ends, in the passing game, or even where Trevor Lawrence and Bo Nix were neck and neck in, EPA per dropback. There are just a lot of similarities in terms of the relative strengths of these two teams. I think that, I started looking at how this year's matchup could be different from last year's matchup. And, I actually feel even better about this year's team against this defense, primarily, again, because of, their strength against or the Bills' strength in the run game, relative strength in the run game and the specific things they do well. But I also feel like their downfield pass game is better this year than it was last year.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, in part thanks to all of the play action that they're adding in, the ability to go to 3 tight end sets. Brandon Cooks has been an incredible ad late in the season. But the spot that I thought was a little bit interesting is Denver's offense. If you look at Bo Nix, his EPA per play is actually slightly down year over year. But when you look at the Denver offense overall, their series conversion rate this year is higher than it was last year. So there's a strain. Their offense is sustaining drives, a little bit better this year than they were last year. And pinpointing the exact reason for that, I think might be that they're not trying to unleash downfield as much as they were before. Bo Nix's average depth of target is down this year. I know a lot of people are talking about all the underneath throws that he makes. And so, the success rate, he's sitting at right now 22. He's 22nd in success rate per drop back. And so, success rate is obviously measured by having a positive EPA, not whether or not the play had positive yardage overall, right? So, if he's dropping back and getting a 4-yard gain on first down, well, that's actually considered a negative. But if Denver settled into a style of offense that methodically moves the chains, more similar to, what the Bills have been in the last, 2 years, basically under Joe Brady, a team can kind of sneakily be a decent offense by doing that, especially when you have a defense that is as strong as Denver's is, relative defense overall. I felt like the Jaguars game, based on what I was seeing with these stats, I always felt like was going to be very close, and I didn't really feel like there was an avenue there to the Bills, opening the game up and really blowing them out. Whereas with this matchup, I feel like there are enough, like I said, kind of to be seen factors, in terms of how it's going to look, when the kickoff happens and when the game's underway, that there is a range of outcomes that includes, a Bills blowout, a close game, or even a loss by a touchdown in the other direction. You know what I mean? That's just what I'm seeing in the numbers conceptually when I look at it.
Yeah, I think of as far as Bo Nix goes, because on next gen stats, I'm actually surprised 10th in EPA per play amongst quarterbacks. So that's, and I think that is reflective of some of the, like what you've alluded to, kind of the wrinkles they've added in Denver's offense to give him some deeper drops and allow him to see the field better. I do think that Sean Payton works well with him as far as what he's good at, which I think for Bo Nix is more of a rhythmic passer, quick timing, West Coast style throws, able to get the ball out to his spot. And he's been doing really well at that in second year, just not as consistent, but I do think that's fair to say in year 2 for a quarterback, you're not really expecting like that huge surge. Obviously, you have cases like Drake May who have had exceptional MVP-like years, and you've seen it before. But for Bo Nix, I'm not really going to punish him as much for not being as poised or polished this year, because I think that's just what I would tend to really expect from most quarterbacks. I mean, you could even look at Caleb Williams this year, who's kind of in the same case, just to a more extreme degree, because it's like when Caleb Williams completes a pass, it's like the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And it's like usually a very explosive play. Whereas Bo Nix, it's more just like stringing along those types of throws, but also in the midst of like some misses or bad decisions. But it's not a knock. I think he's paired with the perfect coach, and I think he's an ascending player in this league. And 10th in EPA does feel right when you see some of the results of these games, and again, some of their comebacks. So when it's talking about how you defend him, I just don't think it's going to be much different than what you saw last year. I think if anything, it could be a bit more of a test for Bo Nix, because I don't foresee Sean McDermott setting a ton of pressure. I think their game plan is going to be very similar to how they approach Jacksonville, which is we're going to try and take away the route concepts that you love the most. So whether that's anything in breaking, out breaking, whatever their main bread and butter route is, we're going to sell out to defend that. And then what we're going to do is, in the same vein of Jacksonville, when we get to that close bind where you have to diagnose this defense, that's when we switch everything up. And I'm just happy to see that from them. I think that's awesome for this Bills defense, that they've kind of been adjusting in that way to really just let the scheme dictate. Because when people evaluate this roster and they look at this defense and they're like, man, it's in peril, I'm like, well, yes, they're dealing with injury, and that absolutely matters. Like losing Jordan Poyer in this game is going to affect them to some degree. At some point, Bo Nix, whether it's Sutton, Ingram, whether it's also Pat Bryant is playing in this
A
game.
big
by the way.
run and a missed tackle, something like that. You know?
Right. Like that's going to happen in this game. And I think that will affect them. But I just don't think the strategy to how you defend Bo Nix in this game is going to change. And I don't think how you defend the run in this game is going to change either, because the Broncos' advanced rushing metrics do not favor them. I don't think RJ Harvey is a bad player. In fact, I love RJ Harvey. I think he's an immensely talented player. But they've just proven this year that their rushing game is not consistent. So I think you can afford to keep the boxes lighter and have these guys play from depth and really just try to take away any opportunity for Bo Nix with his arm. I do have a little bit of concern over Bo Nix's legs. I do know that he uses them very well, and it's been a very core part of his game this season. And why I'm kind of sitting here like, do you spy him? Do you wait to see if he gashes you and you do decide to spy him? Or is it going to be just in their formations where, okay, we're going to bring a bunch of guys up, maybe show you a stack box look, single high, we'll convert it to cover 3, and then one of those linebackers that drops back will just have his eyes on the quarterback, sit in the zone, and if you try to take off, he can play from depth and come take you down. Like that's kind of where I see this going. I don't think you're going to see a marginal difference or a major difference from how they defended Trevor Lawrence, because I think the Broncos, similarly constructed in the fact that they have weapons all over, they have good boundary targets, they have a really ascending, fun slot player again in Bryant. I think Ingram is a useful tight end for them. So I don't think you really have the luxury to sell out to defend the run in this game. But I also think because the Broncos have posed some of their own inconsistencies in running the ball, that you don't really have to. And that I think if you can mix your coverages well enough and keep Bo Nix on his toes, you can get him to throw some errant passes, make some of the wrong decisions, and maybe generate a turnover or two. So that's really what I expect. And as far as pressure, maybe in the third quarter, maybe in the fourth quarter to heat them up. But if they feel like they're in control with their lighter rushes, I don't foresee it changing. I think if anything, it's just Sims creepers and different looks at the line to try and keep him on his toes and off guard. But Adam, any other thoughts? Anything else you want to bring up?
Yeah, I think the other X factor in this, in stopping their run game, could be Joey Bosa. You know, he got a little knocked around last week on a lot of those runs. And obviously he was challenged publicly in the media, by Bobby Babich. Not really challenged, but, he was asked about his bad game, and, he was pretty blunt. I mean, Babich was like, don't let it happen again. Yeah. And, a guy like him is going to take that personal, so you combine that with, and, when I say take it personal, of course, I mean, like, he's going to take it to heart because, he wants it for himself, not like he's going to be mad at Babich. Right. But, he knows he has to play better. And so, you combine that, who knows whether or not Ed Oliver is going to play. I know he was questionable again today, or limited today and questionable for the game. Again, it's just kind of one of those, X factors. I would generally agree with you. I mean, Denver's relative run strength is not super strong, but again, it's very similar to what Jacksonville had to offer, and Jacksonville did break some big runs. So it's all going to be about who's a little bit more prepared, who's got the legs. When the game starts, I think we're going to know really early on, what we can expect. The trenches in the first quarter in the run game are going to dictate how the rest of this game is going to go offensively for Denver and defensively for Buffalo. And if they're not able to, win at the point of attack and Denver's able to break some runs, then it's going to become a little bit more challenging on that side of the ball.
I do agree with that. And I do think they're going to, again, early on, maybe test that for the Bills defense, because at the same time, if you want to run play action and you want it to really be a threat that you can sell, again, we talked about how the Bills didn't really run the ball well against Jacksonville, but still had their play action working for them. But that's also because Josh Allen can get you out of a lot of situations just with his arm and being a freak and making insane throws down the field. But for your defense to avoid having that same fate, you got to be able to show that you could be composed and run defense if you're lighter. Because if they do decide to ball fake and they're gashing you on the ground, I think that's going to put the coverage unit in a little bit of peril if you're asking these guys to play closer to the line and be a little more out of position. But also the Bills defense has been playing kind of like, and this was a point brought up by Anthony and the film room this week that I love, but it was, and Eric, both of these guys pointed it out on tape. they've been playing kind of front to back as opposed to kind of coming up or like giving the space up. It's been more of like a drop back kind of style. And I can appreciate that because I think it does help you in these types of situations too. Because then again, if you do get gashed and you have to drop back, that's kind of been the system you've been working with. And it's not all the time, it's not every play, but it's rather something that I think they've offered more for their defense this year. And it gives them a little bit more comfort when it comes to having to drop back and defend versus come up to defend. But I think that you have a game like that last week where they're just gashing you on the edges. ETN and Tootin are breaking runs to the outside, and it kind of makes you wonder, all right, do they play with a little more space? Do they play a little bit wider? Are they going to be as condensed as they were last week? Do they give their edge rushers a little bit of a better position to be in where they're not going to get cracked on the first, millisecond of every single running play? That's what I'm curious to see if they make those subtle tweaks, because if they do, and you allow your edges to get free where they're not getting blown off the line and they can get into the backfield or at least jam up the lane for Harvey or Beatty or whoever they decide to run in this game, I think that's when you could have a lot of success neutralizing their attack. I think the Broncos are probably going to try and go extension of the run game with the pass like you saw the Bills do in years past, where it's like a lot of screens, a lot of swings, a lot of quick hitters to RJ Harvey, to those running backs in the backfield to try and kind of simulate run game with the pass, which I think is where they could have success. Because ultimately you're going to ask this Bills defense, who is probably playing from depth, to come down from depth and make a tackle, which is how a team wants to challenge them because their tackling has been suspect all year. I think the Broncos could do that. I think it could be a massive factor in this game. So make sure the tackling is buttoned up, because if it is, then I think you could have success with that as well. Anything else, Adam?
No. You want to go offense?
Let's go offense. Let's have some fun with this. And this is another very fun matchup we are really excited to watch, because we talked about it earlier. And one of the things that I brought up was James Cook versus this front, how this offensive line is going to handle this defensive front. I want to make it very clear. I'm still nervous, and I still think this defense is really, really good. So I don't think this is a walk in the park layup by any stretch of the imagination. So if there's a Bronco fan who's watching this, first off, thanks for watching. Second, sorry I flubbed the Pat Bryant thing. Third, I think you have a tremendous defense riddled with talent that is going to be a massive factor and put Josh Allen in a lot of ugly situations in this game. But I just feel like it could end up one of those situations where if Sean McDermott's defense is keeping Bo Nix contained and they aren't able to move the ball through the air and they're getting off the field quickly, I think this could be a situation where the game script favors the Bills and the well could crack eventually because of the physical nature of this front being able to eventually exploit the Broncos' mismatch in size and creating the lanes for James Cook to run through, as well as, like you pointed out with that metric earlier, Adam, duo runs being the key and the bread and butter of the Bills' offense, and them being able to use it comfortably and layer their passing off of it. I mean, if you can get those duo runs going on offense for the Buffalo Bills, I feel like every play action pass just automatically proposes an open receiver because of how much they're going to have their linebackers offer them and run support, and how many mismatches you can create if a linebacker's playing out of position with your tight ends who you target frequently in heavy looks out of your play action. That is what I'm really excited to watch for, because I think the fact that they have Kincaid, the fact that they can go into 13 as often as they do, it's the best version of their offense. I said it last week and I'll say it again. I think that's going to happen again this week. I think they're going to have 2-3 tight ends on the field a lot of the time. I think that a lot of their passing attack is going to flow through the fact that they have the extra blockers and the tight ends that can leak out for routes. And what you're going to ultimately end up in is the Denver defense having to match these guys up with either a nickel or a linebacker and seeing if they can sustain, which I think they can for certain reps. But if we're talking a game where the Bills are able to run the ball on you, it's going to become all the more effective because of how much effort they've had to put in, how depleted they might be, how gassed they might be, how that might offer things up for you going forward. So, I mean, what do you think, Adam? Give me your full-fledged breakdown of this matchup.
Well, first thing I saw that scared me is I was kind of sorting by success rate. Who do you think the number one team is in defensive success rate this year?
Denver Broncos.
It's Denver. I was trying to get you to bite and say Houston.
No,
but it's Denver.
See, I knew it was a test. I was ready.
Yeah, you were ready for it. Number one in success rate overall. They are number one in drop back success rate, number two in rush success rate. So, they're obviously they've had some struggles against the rush, but it's all relatively speaking, right? This is a very, very good defense. Jacksonville was third in rush success rate against Denver second. When you look at drop back success rate, Jacksonville was 12th, Denver's first. So, you know, you look at it and there's definitely some room for pause, but obviously schedule is going to be a part of that. When you start kind of looking at, how they held up against the rush overall, you look at some of the adjusted stats, it's a little less daunting. They were, it's only a little less, by the way. I mean, it's third in DVOA and against the rush. So I mean, overall, however they've done it, even with a little bit of a lighter defensive line, they found ways to kind of put a clamp on things. But this is where matchups come into play. And we've seen it in the past. Sometimes a team has a great season, great run overall based on who they play. But when you have exactly the right type of matchup, you can either take advantage of a team or a team can take advantage of you. And that's kind of where some of this comes into play. You look at these numbers and then I look at things like, the Vegas spreads and how things are looking there. And you think, man, does Buffalo really deserve to be a favorite in this game? But then when you start taking a deeper dive and seeing what exactly are the things that the Bills do well, it's not just about running the ball, it's about how they run the ball. Right. And that's what kind of leaves the door open to being successful. Despite, the fact that that Denver defense has had an incredible year. And so again, this is kind of one of those situations where just like on the other side of the ball, I feel like we're going to know pretty early in the first quarter how the rest of the day is going to go. We're going to see it on the offensive side too. If the Bills can come out and have success running the ball, you should feel really, really good about their chances to put up points on that defense the rest of the day. But if they don't, it's going to be, they're going to be white knuckling a little bit, and we're going to be, doing whatever you do when you watch a game nervous, whether it's biting your fingernails, tap your feet, you're going to have one of those days.
Absolutely. And like you look at their depth chart, and the thing I always forget is they got Drake Greenlaw too. So like this defense is just disgustingly loaded. And there's a very real possibility that everything I said about the duo and everything I said, the stat you presented and the positives are not positive in this game. And this defense actually does a much better job in their second matchup, rebounds and defends them a lot better. The front is just, I'm looking at their depth chart right now, Adam. This is insane. Like Zach Allen, DJ Jones, John Franklin Myers, Jonathan Cooper, who they paid and has been a very good edge rusher, Singleton, Greenlaw, Benito, who's been awesome, Pat Surtain, Hufanga, PJ Locke, Riley Moss, Jaquan McMillan. Barron, they haven't even been playing as a starter primarily. Like, they're loaded on defense. And it's just everything you look at from the advanced metrics, even with the little things that you could take away that the Bills could have success with. And I'm not saying they couldn't either, but it's a test. You got to go into their stadium and deal with this defense. And despite who they played on the schedule, despite some of their ugly performances, I know what the potential of this defense looks like. And it's just an absolutely suffocating unit. And if the Bills can't get anything going on the ground, they're going to rely on any assailable option they have to try and pass the ball, as far as, again, what we talked about earlier with the play action and how they designed it. But if you're talking this pass rush, getting the opportunity to hunt, it's going to be scary. It is. And this offensive line, it's not an indictment on them, but you can only hold back this much talent for so long before you get yourself neutralized. And the thing about last year's game was the wheels did fall off. The game did get out of hand. It took 3.5 quarters to do so. Most of that game was close. And they were being very, very, very poised, very stagnant when it came to defending the run, or more defending the pass. I thought the run did have success in that game. It was a little inconsistent to start, but eventually it broke through. The pass was being defended well. And then a Z-axis Josh Allen lob to Ty Johnson kind of broke things open a little more. And there you go. I think that they're going to have their hands full when they face this defensive front. This front seven is not going to get gashed early. This front seven is not going to get fooled in any capacity. But the reason I just had a semblance of optimism is because what it looks like if you can generate push. Because I said last week, and they didn't really prove it in that game, and maybe they don't prove it in this game, but this Bills front is talented enough to get push on anybody and to create rushing opportunities against anybody. And I think they've done it against this front. So why should I say it'll never happen again? But I do think that they took that loss to heart, and playing this game in Denver and how riled up the crowd will be and how many reinforcements they added through free agency in the draft is why I think this Denver defense should fare a lot better in this game. And a lot better, for them is maybe it's 7-7 and not 13-7 going into the third quarter. And that does freak me out a little bit. And Yeah, man. One seed for a reason. You can make all the schedule comments and all that stuff, but this team beat Kansas City twice. I know only one of those had Patrick Mahomes, took care of the Chargers. Like, this is a good defense, a really, really good defense. And the Bills, it's really going to just come down to, if you get your run taken away again, can Josh Allen put it on his back again? But the members of the secondary, again, not a knock on Jacksonville, but you're talking about reigning defensive player of the year in Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, who I know has a lot of penalties against, but also is a very physical corner and a very good 50-50 match corner. Again, Hufanga and Locke, the safety duo that's just been outstanding this year. How do you get your explosive plays down the field against that unit? That's going to be the biggest test for me. If you can't run, how do you pivot? If you can't pivot, what do you do? That's the question I have. It's that good of a defense. I mean, what are your other thoughts on this, Adam?
Yeah, I went back and I looked at the drive charts from from the playoff game last year, and I was actually really surprised to see the Bills didn't have a single drive that was less than 40 yards. They only punted once in that game. Which for as long as it stayed close, right? Like we're talking about how the score really didn't start turning until maybe third quarter or fourth quarter,
Yeah.
where they really started to fully put it away. They weren't having any problems moving the balls. It was moving the ball. It was just about kind of finishing drives. The difference in that game really was that Denver was not able to sustain drives the way the Bills were. You're looking at, they of course hit the long ball for the touchdown on their opening drive. But then they went punt, missed field goal, punt, downs in the red zone, and then of course downs near the end of the game. So, I'm not going to expect the Bills to put up 7 drives of 40 plus yards against this defense this year. I'm not anticipating it. It would be great if they could, but I'm not anticipating it. And, conversely, this is where I'm going to be circling is, can the Bills defense hold the Broncos offense to this same type of performance where it's just, they crossed midfield 4 times in that entire game, one with the long touchdown. In the second half, they only crossed midfield once. And of course they lost the ball on downs in the red zone because they were trying to catch up at that point with the Bills. If they can do that, then obviously you're going to feel a lot better about, the offense, even if they're limited a little bit more in this matchup.
And I could say for me, when I look at both matchups, if you had to ask me what I was more confident in, it is this defense against this offense. And I want to make it very clear. I respect the offense. I don't think it's void of talent, nor do I think they can't do anything on this defense. I just feel like when we're talking about how Sean McDermott's going to try and match them up, if they had a top 5 rushing EPA in addition to their pass, I'd be a lot more nervous, because then you don't really have any luxuries in front of you, and you're going to have to be as disciplined as possible, but also have to defend the run, which you've shown you've had trouble with if you're the Bills defense. But I think given the injury to Dobbins, and I don't believe, I haven't seen him on the injury report, but I think he's still on their IR. I don't think they activated him this week, so I don't believe he's playing. So you have RJ Harvey going in this matchup. So a rookie running back, still figuring out his field vision in the NFL and trying to get those lanes. He's had some really successful runs this year, but I just don't think they pose the same rushing threat yet as an offense. I think they're getting there and they're building up to something where in the coming years, it is going to be a very good unit as long as Dobbins can stay healthy, or if they draft somebody, or Harvey takes that next step. And I think that he will pose some problems on the ground, but I think it's just the fact that you don't have to have that kind of looming over you as like this, well, there's a Derrick Henry, there's a Saquon Barkley, there's an all-world running back we have to account for, and we have to sell out to stop a spread passing offense. I think the fact that they can drop back, mix their coverages up, and just try to keep Bo Nix flustered, that to me is where the money's going to be made for them. And I just find myself feeling a little more comfortable with that matchup against a Bo Nix that is still very much developing in this league, who could be very good, but I think is still pushing towards getting to that upper echelon of quarterbacks in the NFL. I think that that's where I'm feeling better. And then for the offensive side of the ball, I mean, again, you show me any rushing progress at all and a consistent fast and a factor that's more consistent where you're moving down the field and sustaining drives, I'll feel better as the game goes on. But I need to see it, because even though they did it last year, and even though I have my moments where I'm feeling good about it, that depth chart's ridiculous. That is a ridiculously talented defense with a great coach who deserves a head coaching opportunity. And I got a lot of respect for this Broncos team. They earned the 1 seed. They never wavered this year. They had high expectations and they reached it. So they have to defend it, and we'll see what happens. And I'm excited, man. This is gonna be a fun game. It's really, really good.
There's a lot of reasons to feel pretty confident about this game. And so, usually when I kind of frame my initial opinion about where should I go look, I really do rely on kind of the Vegas spreads, and of course this game is close, like the Jacksonville game is close. But then when you start kind of looking at how that offense matches up with the Bills defense, like you, I feel like that is a major area for exploitation that they could really start to take control of this game the way they took control of it last year. So, if there is any kind of X factor that you feel like helps Denver in this game, I know what mine is. What do you feel like that could be?
An X factor that would help Denver out?
An X factor that would help Denver. Why do you think that the spread is as close as it is, given how we both feel about the Denver offense versus the Bills defense?
Well, to me, I think it has more to do with, I would say the spread is as close as it is because I'm more fearful of the Denver defense. I think what that is indicative of to me is after seeing Jacksonville tame the rushing attack and Jacksonville having favorable rushing metrics, against, I think that Vegas spread being close is telling me that they believe that they could stop their rushing attack again, but this is a more loaded secondary that Josh Allen has to throw into, as well as the injuries to wide receiver that I think there might be a little too much weight on. I don't want to act disrespectful to Davis and Shavers, but they weren't primary targets. But rather that I think there's more bandwidth in the Denver Broncos secondary to, even with coverage disguising or not, just being able to man these guys up, match up with these guys, keep the middle of the field closed, and just really put them in hell. And that's the Achilles heel for the Bills offense, has been teams that can man them up accordingly. They have the guys that can do it in this game. So that's probably my reason for thinking that that's so close. And I would say Denver's X factor is just in their secondary. I think that's where the money's made.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's all, that's all perfectly reasonable. And I would probably agree with that. For me, I feel like it's Sean Payton. I feel like the books, I feel like the football community as a whole has a lot of respect for the type of coach that he is, the types of things that he can figure out on offense. And obviously it hasn't gone well for them totally this year offensively on that, on that side of the ball, but it only takes one game. You know what I mean? It takes one game, and they've had 2 weeks to prepare for, all of their possible matchups that they were going to get. It was very likely that they were going to most likely, face Buffalo. They already had prep in for Jacksonville from the last time they played them very recently. So they've had a lot of time to get ready for, a plan to attack this defense. And that's the one spot where I kind of just leave the door open a little bit to, this could be a little bit more difficult defensively for the Bills than maybe it looks like it should on paper.
Well, and I think it's reasonable to say that too, because Jacksonville, again, we've talked about this a few times, and it can't go unnoticed that Jacksonville still tried to exploit the run defense in this game. What's interesting is how quickly they got away from it, but I do think that has everything to do with just, we have Trevor Lawrence and all these receivers, and the identity of this offense is to throw the ball. So why are we not going to do that? The run is just meant to be a complement. I think Denver could do something much like what Jacksonville did and try to bounce a lot of these runs to the outside, especially if the Buffalo Bills are showing similar looks on their fronts where they're very, again, condensed, where it's very easy for one of these edge rushers to get chipped off by a receiver, and all of a sudden the lane is wide open for RJ Harvey to take advantage of. And he is a very good runner with the ball in his hand. Like, that is another part of it. He's very slippery. He can break tackles. I think Sean Payton does know this and is going to try and make it an effort to, okay, let's say you want to sell out in coverage. Let's say you want to have these guys drop back. I'm dumping this off to RJ Harvey and I'm making you tackle him. And if you can, we'll adjust. But if you can't, we're going to run this thing down your throat, or we're going to move this down their throat. And like, that does scare me. That does concern me a bit. And it's why I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm over the moon confident about this matchup, because I'm definitely not. I just think if I had any level of like, I feel a little better about this, it's defense to offense, but you never know what tricks he has. You never know what wrinkles he's going to try and introduce. And for the Bills, for as much disguising and as much switching of coverages as they've been able to do, and as great as it's been, it's all on tape. And a good offensive coach can recognize what your tendencies are. And it could just be a cat and mouse game of, hey, we knew you were going to try and pivot to this because we showed you this look. Here's our counter punch. Here's where we're going with it. We show you this condensed look, and all of a sudden you think we're going to run play action out of it. So you drop a few of your guys back. No, quick pass. Now we have all this green grass in front of us to get 5 yards at minimum on this play. And now you have to figure out how to stop it on the fly. What I will say about that, though, is Denver better get off to a hot start if they're going to have that type of offensive adjustment, because Sean McDermott will adjust. And if there's anything we've learned about this coach and this defense this season alone, the adjustments they do make on the fly in a game are enough to shut down any offense, like to a very, very high degree. So I would say the big thing for Denver is if you're not up like 14-3, 17-3 or something like that, I would just start getting a little more concerned that my offense is going to put anything together at all consistently, because the second they can get into their comfort zone of just like, okay, you've shown your hand on what you're doing on the script and even off script, and we've shown you what we're going to do, and you've beaten us a couple of ways, we're taking that away. And if you have no counterpunch to that, like, I don't know what you're going to do. So that is big for me too. If Denver doesn't get off to a hot start, I do think they could be in a bit of trouble on offense, and we could be seeing a very low scoring game, like a 17-14 or something crazy like that. I don't know. I'm rambling now, Adam. I mean, any other thoughts you want to present on this? Any other X factors or anything you haven't said?
No, that's all. I think we covered most of the matchup. I'll go out saying this. I think that I said it this morning, and it's funny that you opened the show with this. On some level, I do agree a little bit with some of the people that are saying the Bills got to get it done. And yes, this team, from a relative strength standpoint, this is not the best team that, has ever been around Josh Allen. Stealthily, I think that this team is better than last year's team. I know a lot of people kind of feel differently about that. A lot of the data that I have says that particularly the defense, is better than last year, and that the offense is about the same. And there's some areas that they're a little bit better, some areas that they're a little worse in. But the overall relative strength of this team, I think, is better than last year. The gauntlet this year is different. You don't have other high-powered offenses in with you. I mean, Jacksonville had a little bit of that going on. But between Jacksonville and New England, those are really the only other two high-powered offenses in the AFC. And it's not that if they don't get it done, it's all on Josh Allen. I want to be clear when I say that, because it takes a team to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
But looking at the field right now, it would be incredibly disappointing to not get to the Super Bowl with this squad. Not necessarily win it, but it would feel a little bit like, a wasted opportunity. And so what I don't want to see is a bad Josh Allen game. Yeah. That's what I don't have room for. If Josh goes out there and slings the ball around like he does against Kansas City and all those other previous playoff games, and people say he can never get over the hump, and he has an excellent game, well, then we're going to be talking about other things. It's not really on him, right? But like I said when I let off, if they're going to do it, it's going to be because Josh Allen goes on a 4-game heater and Sean McDermott presses all the right buttons. And we haven't seen it happen yet, so we can't even really conceptualize what that looks like. But realistically, like, that's what it takes to win a Super Bowl, man. You need your best players to ball out. So go do it, go do it.
Fire me up, dude. That was awesome. I love that take. And to an extent, like, when it comes to that narrative, and the way you've presented it is how I would view it too. Because I just didn't like the fact that we had people saying, like, it's Josh Allen, do or die time. He's never going to do it if he doesn't do it here. First and foremost, throw away the concept of a window. Yes, players age, players decline. I understand that. But we're talking about a 29-year-old Josh Allen who just came off one of his best performances ever with the roster that, well, the running game and the offensive line, I agree with you. I think they're top flight and they are a massive thing they lean on. So I think it's fair to say, especially for the rushing offense, it's the best probably we've ever seen with Josh Allen. But with a receiving core like this, and with, injuries that they faced, I just feel like you have to put more emphasis on a team sport when you're talking about a team sport, just a little reasonable thing. And I don't like when people equate it just to quarterbacks only because it's not the only factor. But you are right. A bad Josh Allen game and they're dead in the water. It's just how it's going to be. I mean, unless that bad Josh Allen game is one of his chaotic ones where it's still 3 touchdowns, but it was paired with 2 turnovers, then okay, at least there was some scoring volume to that. But if we're getting like a Houston level Josh performance, that'll be very disappointing. And, I'm sure there will be reasons for it that are beyond him. But ultimately, given what he did last week and the circumstances, I think we've set a bit of an expectation for how he'll perform in the playoffs now. And I think him having a good performance, or at least a baseline acceptable performance, has become kind of the norm. So it would be very upsetting for a lot of the fans to be in this position where, yes, this isn't by no means a cakewalk team, but you kind of expect Josh to just rise to the occasion, and it would be very deflating for him not to. But I do think in this game he's going to. Just what that extent looks like is what I'm questioning, because is it another Jacksonville game where he has 80% completion percentage and throws for a touchdown pass and runs for 2 more and gets the shit kicked out of him and gets up and just plays a tough game? Or are we going to be talking about that version of the Bills we saw this year that had everyone thinking that it was all going to fall apart? I don't want to see that version. So how can you kind of neutralize yourself and stay poised and composed? Because Josh said a couple of weeks ago he took it to heart and did an evaluation of himself and saw how much meat he left on the bone. And I think that really did resonate with him. And I think that's why last week you saw him taking the profit and playing just such a stable game that felt sustainable. And I don't see why that would go away, which is why it would be disappointing if it did, because like we've seen him be this good before. And I know every matchup is different and teams change and it can get harder as it goes on in the playoffs. But if you want to be the best, these are the things you have to do. It's the unfair crown you put on your head of, I have to rise above all these factors and just play my best ball, even if it's against a really tough team. So I think that's a very valid point in the same. And I know we're just going to have to see how he does and how he performs, because the receiving core has questions, but can they rise to the occasion against this defense?
Give me your 1-word description of how Josh Allen played last week.
Incredible.
Okay.
Incredible.
That's good. That's a good one too.
Yeah.
I think surgical.
Yeah.
Right.
100% agree.
Surgical. And I think that's so important and relevant based off of what he said after he self-scouted, right? We saw all season and Eric and Ant posted clips of it over and over again of Josh just not taking the profit that was there that he took all the time during his MVP season last year, right? And when Josh is at his best, it's not necessarily when he's playing bull and china chop Josh. It's not necessarily, I mean, that's fun and that's pretty damn good Josh Allen too. But the very, very best we see Josh Allen is when he is surgical. And I feel like that self-scouting did him a ton of wonder. Leading up to this week, and of course you saw it. It was purely on display. And now he's in that zone. Maybe he can carry it over, and maybe this is the run that we've been waiting for.
Well, he was surgical and he was dialed in with everything. It was this deep ball where he had one miss that went over Brandon Cook's head. Otherwise, the deep ball was clicking and he was on time and he was throwing with a lot of rhythm. And it looked like there was very few passes that didn't feel like they were right on their mark. I mean, just that's when Josh Allen's in his bag. Like if that explosive deep ball is clicking, all of a sudden you're kind of like, oh no, this is like, he's feeling himself. And I said that early on in the game against Jacksonville, like that first drive, even the Dalton Kincaid touchdown pass. Oh my God. Like that's a thing of beauty considering the window. I know the defenders were out of place. That's still a very tight window to fit that ball in and get a touchdown. Like those are the things he does. And this is the conversation we have seemingly every year about Josh Allen in the playoffs, which is why I think it's imperative that don't let this be the game you get solved. Don't let any of these games be the game you get solved, because you also played that poised, composed style of football when you didn't have the one thing that everyone said you needed to be able to play that way, like the run game. It wasn't there. So you've again, it's unfair because asking for perfection every week, it's not right. Like, cause it's so hard to do, but we just have grown accustomed to that kind of Josh Allen. So can you bring that A game again? Not even just this week, but if you win this week, next week, because either of those two defenses are going to be a tall task for you to face. And then if you manage to win that game and you manage to go to a championship, well, any one of the Final Four's defenses, maybe not as much Chicago, I feel like there's some holes there, some injuries,
Yeah.
and some question marks they'd have. In fact, if it was a Bills-Bears matchup, I feel like the universe would just explode for how high caliber of a
Yeah.
shootout that's going to be. But like all these defenses that could potentially test you should you get that far are all just daunting and have dudes and have the coverage ability and have the manpower to take out your best weapon. So how do you rise above that? You got to play to the scheme. You got to keep your best football ahead of you, and you got to play poison. I just think I'm so happy you brought it up, Adam, because that's a tremendous point. Like, while we don't think it's a window and while we know it's a team sport, like you do still want to see him rise to these moments. That's very fair. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, is it too much to ask for perfection? Yeah, probably. But this is, like I said, if they're going to win, I think that's how it's going to look. So that's what I want to see, and, and, and I think he's capable of it. I really do.
Yeah.
So, let's get another one out of the way on Saturday, and hopefully we can be talking about this next week.
And I think the last thing I want to say before we sign off too is we gotta, we're looking at this receiving core, and I've had my backhanded comments on it, but I think Brandon Cooks is more than just this freelance receiver that they brought in. Like, I think we got to put a little more respect on Brandon Cooks' name. He's been their vertical offense since he's gotten, and yes, he's had drops. I am not blind to the drops that he has had. And the one in this last game, I don't even know if that was a drop because CBS refused to show us other angles. So I don't want to say it other than like, I guess so. Brandon Cooks is a dude. Brandon Cooks has kind of reestablished the vertical presence of this Bills offense, and having him does pose a new type of threat and what you can offer a defense into how you're going to attack them underneath, because you do have to keep him in mind. He's gotten the best of several good defenses over the past couple of weeks. He tested Philadelphia's secondary. He made a play last week against a really stubborn Jacksonville secondary. So you know that they have to keep him in mind for any play action shot, for any long developing route. And now that they have that threat and they have their true gadget guy, Curtis Samuel, most likely coming back, I mean, you've seen opportunity for Khalil Shakir open up. You've seen opportunity for their running backs to open up. I just really like the fact that there's a true threat to at least give this defense something to think about and more hesitance when it comes to Josh Allen dropbacks and who he's scanning for, because I think that chemistry is beginning to develop. I think they are starting to click. And should you find that connection in this game, despite the secondary they're facing, that would also be for me like a big thing of, oh, okay, like Josh is about to get really locked in. They're about to have a lot more flexibility, and I'm going to feel a lot better about this matchup. There is a vertical component to this offense now, and I'm very appreciative of the brief but effective time Brandon Cooks has had in Buffalo, to a point where I'm kind of sitting here like, if we have to start talking about the offseason, Adam, I'm kind of thinking of offering him a 1-year deal and asking him to come back. Like, I like what he brings. I think he's still got plenty of stuff left in the tank. Why not at this point have him come back and then build some youth around him and make this a really viable attack? But that's the only thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention earlier. I mean, anything else, Adam, before we sign off with you?
When they signed him, I didn't have a lot of high hopes for what he was going to bring. It's like, well, okay, I guess we'll see. Yeah. And then that week, I followed him on Instagram, and I saw that he is a pilot. He has his pilot's license. He flies his own plane. And I was like, okay, if somebody's out doing that while they're playing professional football, they have a level of professionalism, of seriousness, of attention to detail to them that is, not often seen. And sure enough, I mean, you're right. He's injected a lot into this offense. I'm really excited about the idea of Curtis Samuel coming back this week.
Yeah, me too.
Put a bunch of tweets out about that, about what he can bring to the offense. And I don't know, it again, winning in the playoffs is about doing things the right way at the right time. And I certainly feel like there's a lot of pieces. As much as they've lost, I feel like they've gained a lot as well going into this week. And in the rest of the way, even if Ed Oliver doesn't play this week. I guess we'll see what it looks like.
Yeah, they're banged up, but also at the same time, it feels like a never-ending changing of characters, like a stage is switching, where it's like these guys are hurt, but these two guys came back, and it's almost like funny in a way that can kind of make some unpredictability for your team. Like, oh God, Ed Oliver's back on their front. He hasn't played in weeks, but they lost Max Hairston, but they lost Jordan Poyer. But now do they blitz more because they have the extra linemen? Like, did we prepare our entire offensive game plan around 4-man rushes and simulated pressures, and they're actually just firing at us with 5 and 6 because they have the bulls up front to do it? Like, that would be awesome, and that'd be hilarious, if not ironic, that it happens because they keep getting hurt every single week. And as far as Curtis Samuel, yeah, I mean, like, that's a wrinkle you haven't had since what week did he go down with the neck injury? I can't even remember.
I don't even remember. Yeah,
I think it was Houston, maybe even earlier. So, like, you don't have Curtis Samuel. He's coming back. What do you do with him? He's going to be a motion piece. So are you going to have free releases for Curtis Samuel to go deep down the field? Are you going to run twins out of the backfield where it's him and James Cook and you have him run a route out of the backfield, maybe a seam route? Like, what do you do? Like, all these wrinkles are getting me excited. I cannot wait for this freaking game, Adam. And as always, man, you do a tremendous job. The stats that you presented on the show, very insightful, but your analysis is great as well. And I want you to do everyone who's watching this, listening to this, a solid. Tell them where they can find you, what you got going on, what's next.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Adam Pencil, like it says right there on the screen. I've got, I think it's still pinned. Yeah, my new website I've got pinned on the top of my profile with which is downsetdominance.com. Again, you can look at leverage weighted net series conversion dominance. That's kind of what I call the stat. You can look at a relative strength overall, offense and defense. Look at strength of schedule. You can look at how it relates to point differential. You can look at the each team's weekly performance, including postseason. So you can see kind of, how they've done, over the course of the entire season. I can tell you right now that offensively, I was just looking for it right here. Where's Jacksonville? Interestingly enough, the Jacksonville game was similar to about the Tampa Bay game, most similar to the Tampa Bay game in terms of how the Bills performed on offense and actually on defense, for what it's worth. So I don't know. It's kind of cool. It's a fun site. Check it out. If you have any questions, just, shoot me a message or send me a tweet or post, whatever you want to call it nowadays, on X Twitter.
X Twitter. Yeah. The place formerly known as twitter.com. Yeah, you guys got to do yourselves a favor and follow Adam. I mean, like, one of the most valuable members of our network, and just constantly putting out threads of information that'll help you learn a lot more about the Bills. Some sneaky things that you don't really think about when it comes to the metrics you look for that open your eyes a bit to, wow, this is something I could look out for in the next matchup. Anytime you're just trying to learn more about ball, we have a ton of great people in our network, and Adam is one of them, and he's well worth your time, and you should check him out. That's why I get him on the show, and I'll stop talking about you in the third person. Adam, thank you very much for joining me tonight. I looked at the Broncos depth chart one more time. I love that they have a fullback. His name's Adam Prentice, and his initial is Apprentice. Like, that's unbelievable. And I'm sorry, like, he's 28. Like, his parents definitely knew what they were doing when they gave him that name. That is hilarious. Apprentice. That's, shout out to Adam Prentice. That's just that this is where my mind goes. I'm looking for, like, valuable information, and I see that, and now that's derailed my whole night. But anyways, Adam, thank you for being here again. Always welcome back. For everyone that joined us again, I'm hoping this isn't the end of our in-season coverage. I would love to see the Bills win this game. For all the good and bad we've talked about, one thing is for sure, this Bills team is here in the divisional round, and they have played some of their best ball in these moments, no matter how daunting the defense is. There are matchups to watch out for that could give you some semblance of optimism that they will be good in this game and actually be able to move the ball and score like they did last year. I'm certainly hoping for it. If you are a Bronco fan and watch this, I hope we did right by your team. I apologize for the Pat Bryant flub. I wish you guys the best of luck. It's been a very peaceful time on Twitter/X with these two fan bases. It feels like there's a very cool mutual respect, and I am a part of that. I have nothing but respect for the Broncos, a tremendous franchise with some really awesome fans, really cool colors, and a great roster to boot. This is going to be a hell of a matchup, and I hope anyone who's watching, going, has a great time. I won't be. I'm going to be having a panic attack for 3.5 hours. But this show, we're going to put up the banner that says Joe Revoir. We're going to say, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the game. We will see you next week, good or bad result. But for tonight, we say goodnight. And as always, friends, go Bills. We'll see you soon.